Welcome back, everyone, to Echoes of Ihsan. We like to go deep on this show, and today we're diving into some really fascinating stuff. We're talking about social and ethical conduct from the perspective of Imam al-Ghazali.
Oh, fantastic.
I'm really excited to explore this with you. You always bring such insightful perspectives to the table.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So for our listeners who may not be as familiar with him, can you give us a little background on who Imam al-Ghazali was and why his teachings are still so relevant, like centuries later?
Sure. So Imam al-Ghazali, he lived from 1058 to 1111, and he was this major figure in Islamic intellectual history. Like he was a theologian, a jurist, philosopher, Sufi mystic. I mean, really a true polymath. He's probably most famous for his book Ihya Ulum, which translates to the revival of the religious sciences. And in it, he basically lays out a whole framework for Islamic practice. But it's not just about the rituals and the legal stuff. He goes way deeper than that. He's really focused on the inner dimensions of faith, like purifying the heart, striving for spiritual excellence, what's known as Ihsan in Arabic.
Right. So it's not just about outward actions, it's about inner virtue as well.
Exactly. And that's what makes his work so powerful even today. He shows how these things like compassion, generosity, humility, truthfulness, how those actually lead to a more ethical and fulfilling life. It all starts from within.
I love that. So it's like you can't have a truly harmonious society if individuals are kind of internally chaotic, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's like trying to build a house on a shaky foundation. It's just not going to work.
So, okay, we're focusing specifically on al-Ghazali's teachings on social and ethical conduct. What are some of the key themes we'll be unpacking today?
So one of the things that always strikes me about al-Ghazali is his emphasis on remembering death.
Okay.
Now, I know that might sound a bit morbid at first, but he doesn't mean it in a gloomy or fear-mongering way. He actually sees it as a really powerful tool for spiritual awakening.
How so? How does thinking about death lead to spiritual awakening?
Well, he argues that when we really contemplate our own mortality, when we grasp that our time on earth is limited, it helps us to detach from all the worldly distractions. We start to focus on what really matters. He actually tells a story in his book, The Remembrance of Death, about a tyrant who encounters the angel of death. And this tyrant, he's suddenly faced with his own mortality and he begs for more time, but the angel's like, nope. Your time's up. Every breath has been accounted for. There's no turning back.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. That's a powerful image. It definitely
Yeah.
makes you think about how you're spending your time, right?
Exactly. Al-Ghazali is saying we often get so caught up in chasing these fleeting pleasures, possessions, status, power, all these things that won't matter in the end. But by remembering death, we're kind of jolted out of complacency. We're encouraged to live more intentionally, focus on those virtues, and doing good deeds that actually have a lasting impact.
Yeah. It's like a wake-up call to align our actions with our values to really make the most of the time that we have.
Right. And this idea of remembering death, it's not unique to Islam. You actually find it in many spiritual traditions. Like the Stoic philosophers in ancient Greece, they had this concept of memento mori, which means, remember that you must die. They believed that reflecting on death could actually help us appreciate life more fully and live more virtuously.
So it's a universal theme. It transcends religious boundaries.
Absolutely. It speaks to this deep human need to find meaning and purpose, especially in the face of our own mortality.
And al-Ghazali believed that recognizing our mortality was key to unlocking that meaning and purpose.
Yeah, he really did. He believed that by facing our fear of death, by accepting that it's inevitable, we can actually free ourselves to live more fully in the present moment, to focus on what truly matters. Cultivating those virtues, deepening our connection with the divine, and contributing to the well-being of others.
That's so profound. So he's basically saying that by embracing the reality of death, we can actually live more authentically and meaningfully.
Exactly. And that leads us to another fascinating concept that Al-Ghazali explores, the heart's two doors. He describes this in his work, Marvels of the Heart, where he dives into the heart's role as the seat of both our intellect and our spirituality.
Okay, now I'm really curious. What are these two doors he's talking about?
So Al-Ghazali says that the heart has one door that opens to the outside world through our senses. It's how we perceive the physical world, gather information, experience all those sensations, and interact with our surroundings. It's the door to worldly knowledge and experience. But the heart also has another door, this inner door. And that one opens to the realm of the unseen, the realm of the spirit, the divine. And it's through this door that we connect with our intuition, our inner wisdom, and our spiritual core.
So one door for worldly knowledge, the other for spiritual insight. I love that imagery.
Yeah, it's a powerful image. And he uses this great analogy to illustrate the concept. He compares the heart to a reservoir that prevents water from bursting forth uncontrollably from the earth.
Okay.
In the same way, our constant preoccupation with those sensory matters, with all that information flooding in from the outer door, it can actually veil us from the deeper truths that we can access through that inner door of spiritual intuition.
It's like we're so bombarded by external stimuli, by the noise of the world, that we forget to tune in to our inner voice, to that inner wisdom that we all have.
Exactly. And Al-Ghazali warns us that if we neglect that inner door, if we're only focused on the outer world, we risk becoming spiritually impoverished. We become disconnected from our true selves and from the divine.
That makes a lot of sense. So how do we open this inner door? How do we cultivate that connection with our spiritual core?
That's a great question, and it's something that Al-Ghazali addresses throughout his work. He really emphasizes the importance of practices like contemplation, meditation, and the remembrance of God. These practices help us to quiet the mind, to turn inward, and to cultivate a deeper awareness of our inner world. He also stresses the significance of seeking knowledge from those who have already traveled the spiritual path, those who can be our guides and light the way for us.
It sounds like a journey of self-discovery.
Mm.
It's about peeling back those layers of conditioning and societal expectations and connecting with our true essence.
Yes, exactly. And Al-Ghazali believed that this inner work is essential, not just for our personal growth, but also for our social and ethical conduct. He argues that a heart that's been purified, a heart that's aligned with those divine principles, naturally leads to virtuous actions, to ethical behavior.
So the inner transformation is the foundation for that outward ethical conduct. I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. But how do we actually go about purifying the heart? What are some steps we can take?
Well, Al-Ghazali talks about the importance of jihad al-nafs, which means the struggle against the lower self.
I've heard that term before. Can you maybe unpack it a bit? For someone like me who's not a scholar of Islamic theology.
Of course, it's like this internal battle, this struggle against our negative tendencies, our ego, those desires that lead us away from what is truly good and just. It's about noticing those negative patterns within us, those habits that hold us back from living in alignment with our values.
So those voices in our head that tell us we're not good enough or that we should always put our own needs first.
Right. Jihad al-nafs is about actively challenging those voices, those impulses. It's about choosing to act in a way that's aligned with our higher selves, with our spiritual goals. So we work on cultivating virtues like patience, generosity, humility, truthfulness, and we try to overcome those vices like greed, envy, arrogance, anger.
Sounds like it's a lifelong process, not a one-time battle.
Yeah, you got it. Al-Ghazali emphasized that it's this ongoing process of self-reflection, self-discipline, and always striving to be better. He believed that every moment gives us a chance to choose between those lower impulses and our higher aspirations. And if we keep making the effort to choose that higher path, we gradually transform ourselves from within.
I like that, like building a muscle. The more we practice choosing virtue, the stronger we become. It gets easier to resist those negative impulses over time.
Exactly. And Al-Ghazali believed that this inner struggle, this jihad al-nafs, is crucial not just for our own personal growth, but for the well-being of society as a whole.
So how does this internal struggle actually translate into ethical conduct in our social interactions? That's what I'm really interested in digging into.
That's a great question, and it's something we're going to explore more deeply in the next part of our conversation. So before we jump to the break, we're talking about this concept of jihad al-nafs, right? That inner struggle against our lower selves, how that's actually the foundation for ethical behavior.
Yeah, and I'm really interested to hear more about how Al-Ghazali connected this inner work to how we interact with others in society. Like, how does personal transformation actually lead to social harmony?
Yeah, that's a great question. Al-Ghazali really believed that a society is only as strong as the character of its people. Like, if you want a just and compassionate world, you got to start by cultivating those qualities within yourself first.
It's like a bottom-up approach, right? Fix yourself and then the world will follow.
You could say that. He put a lot of emphasis on this idea of adab. It's often translated as good manners or etiquette, but it's much deeper than that.
Okay, how so?
Well, adab, it encompasses like all aspects of ethical conduct, from the way we speak to how we treat others, even down to how we eat and dress. It's about living with this sense of grace, humility, and respect for ourselves and for everyone around us.
So it's not just following a bunch of rules. It's more like embodying a certain way of being in the world.
Exactly. And al-Ghazali believed that adab comes from a purified heart, a heart that's free from those vices like arrogance and envy and greed. He said that when our hearts are pure, our actions naturally follow. We treat others with kindness and compassion and fairness because it's just flowing from within.
It's like the saying, what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart. Our outward behavior is just a reflection of our inner state, right?
Right. And he gave a lot of practical examples of how adab actually shows up in our social interactions. For example, he was a big believer in truthfulness. He considered it to be like the cornerstone of ethical conduct.
Yes.
He believed that even small lies, even those little white lies, can damage our integrity and break down trust. So he encouraged his followers to be really honest in all their dealings, to always strive for truthfulness, even when it's hard.
Especially these days, honesty feels like it's in short supply.
Mm-hmm.
We're constantly bombarded with spin and propaganda, both in the media and in our personal lives.
For sure. He might have been writing centuries ago, but those teachings about truthfulness are even more important today than ever. He knew that a society can't thrive if it's built on lies and deception. Trust is what binds communities together, and once that's broken, everything unravels.
Totally, like a domino effect. One lie leads to another, and then nobody knows what to believe anymore.
Exactly. He also talked a lot about justice. He believed we should treat everyone with fairness, no matter what their social status, wealth, or background. True justice is not about showing favoritism. It's about doing what's right and being equitable, even when it's tough.
So that connects back to the jihad al-nafs you mentioned earlier, that struggle against our lower selves. It sounds like justice requires us to overcome our own biases and prejudices, to look beyond our self-interest and act for the good of everyone.
Yes, that's a really important point. Al-Ghazali believed that to be truly just, you have to develop the sense of detachment from your ego, from your desires and prejudices. We should try to see the world through the lens of divine wisdom, recognizing that everyone is equal in the eyes of God, and we should treat each other accordingly.
That's a beautiful idea, but also incredibly challenging, right? How do we even begin to overcome our limitations and reach that level of impartiality?
He knew it wasn't easy. He emphasized self-awareness, recognizing our biases and blind spots, and also seeking knowledge and guidance from those who are wiser and more experienced than us. They can help us see past our limited perspectives.
So it's a never-ending process, I guess, constantly learning and unlearning.
Yeah, you could say that. He was really big on the pursuit of knowledge as an essential part of ethical conduct. He believed we should never stop trying to understand ourselves, the world, and those divine principles that govern everything.
So ethical conduct isn't just about how we act, but about how we think and see the world.
Right. He argued that our thoughts, our intentions, our motivations, they're all just as important as our outward actions. True ethical conduct, it comes from a heart that's aligned with divine wisdom, a heart motivated by a genuine desire to do what's good, true, and just.
So it's not just blindly following the rules. You have to understand the principles behind them, the wisdom that informs them.
Exactly. Blind obedience isn't true virtue. It's about understanding why something is right or wrong, and then choosing to act accordingly.
It's about aligning your actions with your values, with your understanding of what's right and just.
Yes. And he gave many examples of this principle of intentionality in action. Like, he placed a lot of emphasis on generosity. Giving to those in need, it's not just a charitable act, it's a way of purifying our hearts from greed and attachment to material possessions.
Yeah, there's that saying, the hand that gives is always above the hand that takes.
Huh.
Like generosity benefits both the giver and the receiver. It's a win-win.
Exactly. And he also talked about how generosity isn't just about money, but about giving our time, our energy, and our compassion. True generosity comes from a place of love and compassion, recognizing the interconnectedness of all beings.
It's like seeing yourself in others, recognizing that their suffering is your suffering and their joy is your joy.
Exactly. He believed that this sense of interconnectedness is crucial for building a just and compassionate society. We should view everyone as part of one big family, regardless of race, religion, or social status.
Like the concept of ummah in Islam, right? That idea of a global community united by faith and shared values.
Yes. He would definitely see ethical conduct as a cornerstone of a strong and vibrant ummah. When people embody these principles, truthfulness, justice, generosity, compassion in their interactions, it creates a ripple effect. It transforms not only their own lives, but the lives of those around them, ultimately leading to a more harmonious and just society.
It's a beautiful vision and makes me wonder, how did al-Ghazali view our relationship with the material world? Did he think we should completely reject worldly possessions and pleasures?
That's a really insightful question, and it's something we'll explore in the next part of our conversation.
So we're back talking about Imam al-Ghazali, and before the break, we were getting into his views on, wealth and possessions and all that. Did he basically say, give up everything and live like a monk?
Not exactly. I mean, he recognized that we live in a physical world. Material things, they have their place. His concern was more about our attachment to those things, how we can get so caught up in chasing wealth, status, pleasure, all of that.
Yeah, it's like that saying, money is a good servant but a bad master, right? You need it to survive, but it can easily become an unhealthy obsession.
Exactly. He believed that getting too attached to worldly possessions could really distract us from what truly matters. Like, our real purpose is to get closer to the divine, but when we're so busy acquiring more and more stuff, we kind of forget to work on ourselves, on our spiritual growth.
It's like we're building this fancy house, but then we forget to put any furniture in it. All the things that make a house a home, love, compassion, wisdom, that connection to something bigger than ourselves.
I love that. That's a beautiful way to put it. Al-Ghazali, he loved to use these vivid images to get his point across. In his book, The Revival of the Religious Sciences, he compares the world to this, like, really beautiful but treacherous woman. She lures people in with her charms, but ultimately she leads them astray.
Wow, okay. That's pretty intense. But it makes sense. It's easy to get caught up in chasing success or pleasure or whatever, only to end up feeling empty and unfulfilled.
Right. What he's saying is that true happiness, real contentment, it doesn't come from external things. It comes from cultivating inner peace, purpose, connection to the divine. It all starts from within.
So it's not about totally rejecting the material world. It's more about finding that balance, right?
Yeah,
Using those possessions as tools, but not becoming a slave to them.
exactly. He stressed the importance of moderation in everything, including our material pursuits. Like, enjoy the good things in life, but don't get attached. Use your wealth and possessions wisely to benefit yourself and others, and to make the world a better place.
It's like that saying, live simply so that others may simply live, being mindful of how our choices impact the world around us.
I love that. Al-Ghazali wrote centuries ago, but his ideas about moderation and conscious consumption, they're so relevant today, especially with everything going on, like climate change and inequality.
Yeah, that's what's so amazing about his work. It transcends time. It speaks to us no matter what century we're living in.
Definitely. He gives us this framework for a life of meaning and ethics, a life that's grounded in spiritual principles, but also engaged with the realities of the world.
And to tie this all back to what we've been discussing, how did his view of the material world influence how we should interact with others?
Well, he believed that not being so attached to possessions, it could actually foster more compassion and generosity. When you're not constantly wanting more for yourself, you actually start noticing the needs of those around you. You're more likely to want to help.
Yeah. It's like when you're stressed out and overwhelmed, you're not really present for other people. But if you find that inner peace and contentment, you suddenly have so much more to give.
Exactly. He said true generosity comes from a heart that's free from that greed and attachment. He wanted people to give freely to those who are struggling, not because they feel obligated, but because they genuinely want to make a difference, to share the abundance they've received.
And it goes beyond just giving money, right? It's about giving your time and attention, your compassion and your love to the people around you.
Yes. He saw generosity as this essential part of what makes us human. It's how we connect with others and build stronger, more compassionate communities.
So to sum it all up, it seems like al-Ghazali's teachings offer this really holistic approach to social and ethical conduct. It's about working on yourself internally, but then expressing that virtue in how you interact with the world, both in your personal relationships and in how you engage with society.
You said it perfectly. For Al-Ghazali, it wasn't about separating these things. Ethical conduct was this integrated way of being, aligning your thoughts, intentions, and actions with those divine principles.
This has been such a fascinating conversation. I feel like I have a much deeper understanding of his teachings now and how I can actually apply them to my own life. As we wrap up, is there one key takeaway you'd want our listeners to think about as they maybe continue exploring al-Ghazali's work on their own?
I think one of his core messages that runs through all his writings is the interconnectedness of everything. Our inner world and the outer world, they're not separate. He reminds us that our personal growth isn't just about us. It has an impact on everyone around us. By working on ourselves and cultivating those virtues, we're actually helping to create a more ethical and harmonious society. It's a journey worth taking, even if we just take it one small step at a time.
That's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your insights on Imam al-Ghazali with us. And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has inspired you to learn more about his work. Until next time, may we all strive to embody those principles of Ihsan, spiritual excellence, in our own lives and in the world around us.
Yeah.